Don't look now, ladies and gentlemen, but it is almost officially baseball season. As the Phillies are beginning to report down in Clearwater with pitchers and catchers starting out the spring training process, a former Phillies legend has spoken out on the outlook of the team that I do want to dig into his specific comments here. Jimmy Rollins, with not the most optimistic lens for how the offseason did go and the outlook for here, but he did take a little bit of a shot at our NL East division rival, which I did appreciate there. So I'm going to dive into exactly what he said, as well as a couple storylines coming out of training camp, and really see how the Phillies stack up across the National League here. Now, before I dive fully into it, do want to remind you guys, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. At this point, 76.9% of you guys tuning into these videos have not subscribed to the channel just yet. We are ready to buckle up and get in the full swing for this Phillies season. Hopefully better times ahead compared to that playoff exit that did happen last year, and we're going to be on it from start to finish this year. So make sure you guys are rocking with us, want as many people a part of this Phillies journey as possible. Now, to get into what Jimmy Rollins did say, do want to start out with this quote. Shout out to our guy, Phillies Tailgate, constantly keeping us in the loop here, and he tweets out, quote, "Everybody wanted them to do more. I wish they would have done more. I don't know what moves there were to be made. They have budgetary reasons for why they will or won't do things there." And this is kind of the theme of the offseason. Does feel like this Phillies team is banking on a couple redemption stories when talking about some of the pitchers they brought in and Max Kepler and those factors there, as well as hoping for some continued internal development for guys like Bryson Stott, like Alec Boehm, like Johan Rojas potentially. Players that they're hoping can take their game to the next level this year is sort of the most, I guess, optimistic view from here. And on top of that, that is not to short sell guys like Kyle Schwarber, guys like Bryce Harper. Trey Turner still has another level that he needs to get to in a Phillies uniform. Nick Castellanos returning. There are still some stars on this Phillies team, despite the massive amounts of money being spent across the league. Now, I did want to highlight one of Jimmy's other comments in here that I appreciate a little bit more than that first one, as it was a little bit of a shot at the New York Mets. And the question was, having Juan Soto in the division, how does that change its complexion? And Jimmy said, quote, "Soto has been in the division before, so it really doesn't do much. The Mets had a good team last year, and they had a great second half, no doubt about it. He brings some stability to that lineup, but at the end of the day, the Mets have to prove they can win. I know they knocked us out, but it's a New York team. Maybe with them, getting to the playoffs can satisfy you a little bit. But for a New York team or any East Coast team, just getting to the playoffs is not good enough." And I do love that quote there from Jimmy. Obviously, the Mets did their thing and got the better of the Phillies in that series there. But it will be interesting to see exactly how these teams do stack up. Juan Soto being the clear, I guess, headliner of this entire Major League offseason. But the reality is you still got to put the exact same amount of guys on the field. And we will see if in a second go-around, another opportunity, if this Phillies team got a little bit more in store. If the bats don't go quite as cold this turn around. And that is really the room for optimism for this Phillies team. Now, as it pertains to his first statement, it really was in comparison to the Dodgers here. And I do want to revisit that question a little bit. But before I do that, I do also want to highlight his other quote here, as he was asked directly about Kyle Schwarber. He said, "I talked to Kyle Schwarber, and he said he would love to be extended. Would you like to see that happen?" To which Jimmy Rollins replied, quote, "I'd love to see him stay. What he's done for the team, being a big bat, but also a silent presence on the field. He doesn't say much outwardly, but his presence, when you see him coming up to the plate, something big can happen and real fast." And that is the Kyle Schwarber story there. I will say, from my perspective, or my opinion right here, I want Kyle Schwarber to retire in red pinstripes. That he's everything that I could possibly want in a guy that represents this Phillies organization, a true leader, a dude who carries himself in the best of ways, is a winner by every single definition, absolutely a winning baseball player. And I think there's a little bit more to unpack. Yes, he's led the league in home runs in a Phillies uniform already. Yes, he has dominated at the top of the lineup, but it would not shock me if this year we see the best version of Kyle Schwarber, if maybe he is dropped down the lineup a little bit, that Rob Thomson does play around with what is the best structure to maximize this team's potential. I'm very curious to see how he fits into this. Kyle Schwarber himself has been quite open on wanting to be extended, and that those talks will go down once spring training fully hits the ground running here. So very curious what those conversations will have, what that dollar amount, or I guess length amount, is probably the larger factor here. This was an offseason that, while it was underwhelming, the future goals are still ahead. That this was a bit of a take a step back to go 2 steps forward. That when you look around the rest of the major league, the massive money being spent on the headliners like Juan Soto, that there wasn't really this middle ground for the top tier market. And when you particularly factor in how sort of landlocked the Phillies are from a positional perspective, and by that I mean you have Bryson Stott locking down second base, you have Alec Boehm at third, you have Bryce Harper at first, you have Trey Turner at shortstop. Those guys all coming off all-star appearances. Like, this isn't something that you can kind of, shake up in the full scale unless you really got to do some damage there. And while I did did enter this offseason with the hope that that would be the case. I do understand it now that things have settled in a little bit, and it makes it hard. So one of these sort of middle tier moves, such as Alex Bregman, would be a guy I would kind of categorize into that, although he's on the upper echelon of that from a dollar perspective. I will say sliding him into third base, I think, would improve their immediate chances. But it is fair to argue if he can actually, at this stage of his career, be productive in the version of Alec Boehm that will show up this year. So to be determined on that. But did want to acknowledge a little bit of J. Roll's comments regarding, I believe I took this to mean regarding the Dodgers when we talk about the budgetary standards. Now, when thinking about how the Phillies match up with the Dodgers, there's no doubt that this is almost an all-star team. We know how deep they go, from Shohei Ohtani to Freddie Freeman to Mookie Betts. You can go down the list of talent. But one of the angles that I feel the Phillies are really leaning into it as an identity standpoint, it is with the pitching staff. We know who they have with Zack Wheeler. We know who they have with Aaron Nola. Ranger Suarez will be interesting to see how he is utilized this year and what level he can perform at. Christopher Sanchez, a huge story last year. By my money's worth, the biggest story surrounding this Phillies team of him turning himself into a legitimate high-caliber pitcher there. Even a guy like Jesus Luzardo, who's brought in, we'll be really curious to see how they're able to shape in this whole pitching staff. And I think that is the angle that they want to take. They want to be able to out-pitch teams. And when looking at the cost of bats and how star-studded some of these opposing lineups are, I do understand the logic here. Now, to compare that to the Dodgers pitching staff, however, it's still a pretty steep ask there. Like, look at the pitching staff, the depth chart for the Dodgers. There are a lot of names on this, from Blake Snell to Yamamoto to Tyler Glasnow, Shohei Ohtani, Roki Sasaki. The names go on and on for how deep this team is, but I guess the only perspective, or I guess, positive view I will point here is you guys got to put the same amount of players on the field. This isn't something that you can go that deep in, and yes, it will pay off over the larger course of the season, but when we get to that point where it's about crowning a champion in the National League or in the MLB as a whole, it is your best player versus their best player, and the Phillies stack up with that a little bit better than I think they sometimes receive recognition. Bryce Harper, one of them ones. Trey Turner needs to get back to that. That is really an X factor for can he be a co-star level to Bryce Harper in a way that, if we're going to be honest, he has not performed up to just yet. Yes, there have been flashes where he's been much better. Last season was significantly better than his first year in Philadelphia, but he has not been this Trey Turner, co-star to Bryce Harper that was really hoped to for this. Now, for the Phillies team as a whole, there's also a couple other underlying storylines that I think are really interesting. For starters, when you do flip down this Japanese pitching, or from the Dodgers pitching staff, you see a lot of these Japanese names that are making impact. Shohei Ohtani, by my money's worth, the best baseball player of all time. I do feel that way, and he's still in the early part of his career. Yamamoto, we saw what he did last year, and obviously adding Roki Sasaki there. This is an area that the Dodgers have essentially monopolized from a standpoint, and geography has a whole lot to do with this, but the Phillies have been itching to get in that market. That is a pipeline of baseball talent that really they have not been able to dive into, and they're not alone in that stance. So what did happen for this Phillies team? I think a step in the right direction for this. And why is that? Because the Phillies might have missed out on phenom Roki Sasaki, and it sounds like they played a huge part in the Los Angeles Dodgers officially signing him. By that meaning, they did help with him going through the pipeline of having to trade a little bit of cap space for the international market signing. Sasaki was not just this standard free agent that you could hand a blank check to. He's got to kind of go through the process, same way that Ohtani initially came to the MLB there. But the bottom line is that's what that was referencing. But the article continues, but that's not stopping them from taking their first step towards having a real footprint in Japan. Per Anthony Franco of MLB Trade Rumors, the Phillies have signed Koyo Ayagaki to a minor league deal and will invite him to spring training as a non-rostered invitee. Now, I'm not going to sit up here and talk about how this guy changes the franchise from a talent perspective. He is a little interesting. Did watch some highlights, a sidearm released, and does feel like he's got some stuff there. So certainly a guy worth taking a chance on. But I do think this is about laying the foundation for trying to get into that talent pool. If the Phillies can begin to tap into that, that is another way that they can improve that roster, and one that they have not really explored to this point. So that is something that's really interesting to me. That's more of a long-term message to keep in mind. But if you do want to go bar for bar with the Los Angeles Dodgers and compete with them on a talent level, that is a market you got to get into, and I would love to see the Phillies start to do that. So wish there was a bit of a stronger push this particular offseason for Sasaki, but understand you're fighting an uphill battle with being on the direct opposite side of the country and everything that comes with the Dodgers and the money that comes with it there. So no hate from that angle there. But shout out to Jimmy Rollins for taking a little bit of shot at the Mets this year. It was an underwhelming offseason for this Phillies team, but all can be right if things click on the field. And that is what we will be on top of from start to finish right here on Phillies Digest. So once again, if you guys have not already, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. As I pointed out, 76.9% of you guys tuning into this video have not subscribed to the channel just yet. We're going to be on it from start to finish for this Phillies team. And me and Luke Arcaney breaking things down and want each and every one of you along for the ride with us. So smash that subscribe button if you haven't just yet. Drop a like on this video, any comments that you have below, and we're about to dive into the real work of this season. The quotes coming out of spring training, the games actually being played. We have baseball to talk about. So very excited, cannot wait to get going, and I hope every one of you will join us with us. So appreciate each and every one of you guys, and talk to you next time. Peace.